Your brother needed that sports car more than you need a house. My father said that at his kitchen table, my hands flat on the wood, while I held a mortgage denial for $114,800 in debt I never spent. My brother had opened 11 accounts in my name and forged my signature 19 times. My father knew. I didn't argue. I folded the letter, put it in my bag, and drove home to the folder I'd been building for 8 months. 19 signatures. All highlighted in red. When I laid that folder on the detective's desk, he picked up his phone before I finished my second sentence. When my father walked into that same precinct 2 days later and the detective slid the folder across the table, my father didn't touch a single page. He looked at my brother. My brother looked at the floor. That silence cost them both something they are still trying to get back. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back to the night my brother handed me a pen and my father stood in the doorway and said, "Don't make this into something." The night it all started wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices or slammed doors. It was just a Tuesday in my parents' kitchen, the air smelling of roasted chicken and the floorboards creaking under my father's heavy steps. My brother, Leo, was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone with that bored, entitled expression he's worn since he was 10. He didn't even look up when he slid a single sheet of paper across the granite. "Hey, can you sign this real quick?" Leo asked. His voice was flat, like he was asking me to pass the salt. "It's just for a background check for that new logistics firm. They need a family reference to verify my old address since I lived with you for a few months last year." It's a clerical thing. I reached for the paper, but my father moved first. He stepped into the doorway, physically blocking the exit to the living room. He didn't look at the paper, he looked at me. "Don't make this into something, Sarah," he said. His voice had that warning edge, the one that meant the family hierarchy was being invoked. "Your brother is trying to get his life on track. He finally has a real lead on a career. Just help him out so we can all have a nice dinner." I looked at the lines on the page. It looked official enough, though the header was slightly blurry, like it had been scanned and reprinted. There was a space for my name, my social security number, and my signature. "Why do they need my social for your background check?" I asked. Leo finally looked up. He gave a sharp, frustrated sigh. "Because we live together, Sarah. They have to run a soft pull to make sure I wasn't just hiding out from debt collectors at your place. It's standard." "Don't be a lawyer about it." "I'm not being a lawyer," I said quietly. "I'm just asking." "Just sign it," my father barked. "He's been working on this for weeks. If he misses the deadline because you want to cross-examine him, that's on you. Do you want him to fail? Is that what this is?" That was the move. In our house, asking a question was the same as an attack. If I didn't provide immediate, unquestioning support, I was the one causing the conflict. I was the responsible one. I was the one with the steady job in insurance. I was the resource. I picked up the pen. My father watched my hand. Leo went back to his phone. I signed the name I'd spent 28 years making stand for something. "There," I said. Leo snatched the paper back before the ink was even dry. He didn't say thank you. He just walked out of the kitchen toward the garage. My father finally stepped aside, his face softening now that he'd gotten what he wanted. "Good girl," he said. He patted my shoulder, but it didn't feel like affection. It felt like he was checking the structural integrity of a tool. At dinner, the atmosphere shifted instantly. My mother brought out the chicken and placed the largest breast on Leo's plate. She didn't ask how my week was going. She didn't ask about the house I'd been scouting. For 2 years, I'd been living in a tiny studio apartment, eating oatmeal for dinner 3 nights a week, and picking up overtime shifts just to build a down payment. I wanted a garden. I wanted a front door that didn't rattle when the neighbors walked by. "So, Leo," my father said, his eyes bright, "tell your mother about the new venture. The logistics thing is just the start, right? Leo leaned back, radiating a confidence he hadn't earned. Yeah, I'm looking into some private equity stuff on the side. High-end transport. There's a lot of money in moving luxury assets if you have the right setup. I might need to upgrade the image a bit, but the returns are huge. That's my boy, my father said. You have to think big to be big. I cleared my throat. I actually put an offer in on that cottage on Elm Street today. The inspection is Friday. The table went silent. My mother paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. My father didn't look away from Leo. That's nice, Sarah, my mother said quickly. She looked at the counter. Oh, I forgot the napkins. She stood up and scurried away, her usual tactic for avoiding any conversation that didn't center on Leo's greatness. A cottage, Leo smirked. Isn't that a bit small for someone with your career? It's what I can afford, I said. I've worked hard for that deposit. Everyone works hard, Sarah, my father said, his voice turning cold again. You don't need to brag about it. Your brother is talking about a real future here. Let's stay focused on the positive. I stopped talking. I realized then that my house wasn't a milestone to them. It was a distraction. It was money I was spending on myself that wasn't being redirected toward Leo's potential. Later that night, as I was helping my mother clear the table, I noticed a stack of mail on the entryway bench. Most of it was for my parents, but a thick envelope sat on top. It was addressed to me, but it was at my parents' address. I hadn't lived there in 5 years. I reached for it, but my mother's hand clamped down on mine. I'll take care of that, honey, she whispered. Her eyes were wide, darting toward the living room where my father and Leo were watching a game. It has my name on it, Mom. Why is the bank sending mail here? It's probably just a mistake, she said, her voice shaking slightly. You know how the post office is. I'll give it to your father. He'll handle the forwarding. I can handle my own mail. Sarah, please, she said, her voice cracking. Don't make a scene, just let it go. We're having such a nice night. She pulled the envelope away and tucked it into a kitchen drawer. She didn't look me in the eye. She just started scrubbing a pot that was already clean. I left shortly after. The car ride home was quiet, but my skin felt tight. I kept thinking about the way Leo had snatched that paper. I thought about the way my father had stood in the doorway like a bouncer. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling of my studio when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an automated alert from my credit monitoring service. A hard inquiry has been made on your credit report by Mid-Valley Luxury Imports. I sat up. I didn't know a Mid-Valley Luxury Imports. I'd never been there. I'd never even looked at a luxury car. I opened the app, my heart starting to thud against my ribs. The inquiry had been made 40 minutes ago. 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I looked at my hand, the one that had held the pen in the kitchen. That was the first lie. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my sofa with my laptop open, the blue light stinging my eyes until the sun started to bleed through the blinds. I spent 6 hours refreshing my credit report, watching the numbers shift like sand. It wasn't just one inquiry. By 4:00 a.m., there were 3, all from high-end dealerships, all using my social security number. I was at the bank before the doors even opened. I stood on the sidewalk in my work blazer, clutching my purse so tight my knuckles ached. When the glass doors finally buzzed, I walked straight to the desk of the loan officer I'd been working with for months. Her name was Mrs. Gable. She usually greeted me with a smile and a "how's the house hunting going?" Today, she didn't even look up from her screen. "Sarah," she said, her voice dropping into a low, professional register that made my stomach drop. "I was actually just about to call you." "I saw the alerts," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "I didn't authorize those inquiries. I think someone has my information." Mrs. Gable sighed and finally met my eyes. There was no warmth there. There was pity and something else, irritation. "It's a bit more complicated than a few inquiries, Sarah. I ran your full updated report for the final mortgage approval this morning. The system flagged it immediately. She turned the monitor toward me. At the top of the screen, the number was highlighted in a jagged, angry red. My credit score, which had been a pristine 793 months ago, had plummeted into the low 500s. It looked like a typo. It looked like someone had accidentally deleted a digit. I don't understand, I whispered. I pay every bill on time. I don't have any debt. You do now, Mrs. Gable said. She hit a key, and a list began to scroll. It was a graveyard of my financial future. There were 11 new accounts. 3 platinum credit cards, all maxed out at $15,000 each. 2 personal signature loans for $10,000 apiece. And the anchor that had finally dragged everything to the bottom, a luxury auto loan for a 2024 Italian sports car. The total debt was $114,800. The auto loan was finalized yesterday afternoon, she explained, her voice flat. The first payment was technically due upon signing, but the account is already being flagged because the linked repayment account, an online checking account in your name, has a balance of 0. I didn't buy a car, I said. My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from another room. I drive a 6-year-old sedan that's paid off. I'm buying a house. I've been saving for 3 years. I know you have, she said, and for a second the pity went out. But as of 10 minutes ago, your mortgage application has been officially denied. With this debt-to-income ratio, no lender in the country will touch you, not for a house, not for a toaster. But it's fraud, I insisted. I can prove it wasn't me. I was at work. I have logs. Sarah, look at the addresses. She pointed to the screen. The billing address for every single one of those accounts wasn't my studio apartment. It was my parents' house. The primary phone number listed was my brother's cell. The bank's fraud department looks at these things, Mrs. Gable said, leaning in. When the debt is tied to a family residence and the signatures match the ones we have on file for you, which they do perfectly, they don't see identity theft. They see a family loan gone wrong. They see a daughter who co-signed for her brother and is now trying to back out because she wants a house. I didn't co-sign, I said. I signed one paper for a background check. 19 times, she said. What? There are 19 electronic and physical signatures across these 11 accounts. They weren't all done yesterday. This started 8 months ago, Sarah. Small cards at first, then the loans, then the car. It was a slow build. The room felt like it was tilting. 8 months. For 8 months, while I was eating oatmeal and working double shifts, Leah was building a life on my back. And for 8 months, my father had watched me do it. He'd watched me look at listings. He'd heard me talk about my meager savings at dinner. I stood up. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of the bank and into the bright, mid-morning sun, but I couldn't feel the heat. I felt cold. I felt like I was made of glass and someone had just tapped me with a hammer. I sat in my car in the parking lot and pulled up the GPS. I didn't go to work. I drove toward the dealership listed on the report, Mid-Valley Luxury Imports. It was a gleaming palace of glass and chrome on the edge of town. I parked my dented sedan between 2 SUVs that cost more than my college education. I walked inside, my legs shaking. A salesman in a suit that cost more than my monthly rent approached me with a practiced, predatory smile. "Can I help you, miss?" "I'm Sarah Miller," I said. "I'm here about the car that was picked up yesterday, the sports car." The salesman's smile widened. "Ah, yes, the Rosso Corsa. Your brother was thrilled. It's a magnificent machine. He mentioned you might be coming by to handle the final insurance paperwork." "My brother," I repeated. "Leo." "That's right, and your father, of course. He was here for the signing, too. Such a proud moment. He told us how much you wanted to do this for Leo to give him the image he needs for his new firm." I looked past him through the glass wall of the showroom. There on a pedestal was a photo of the car. It was sleek, red, and aggressive. It looked like a predator. "My father was here," I asked. "Oh, he was the life of the party," the salesman chuckled. "He even signed as the witness on the secondary financing documents. He said family is everything." Family is everything. I walked out of the dealership without another word. I got into my car, gripped the steering wheel, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding since the bank. The damage wasn't just a number on a screen. It wasn't just a denied house. It was my life, stripped down and sold for parts to put my brother in a red car. I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just drove. That was the first time I realized that being the responsible one was just another way of saying I was the one they felt safest stealing from. The drive to my parents' house felt like a countdown. I didn't park in the driveway. I pulled up to the curb, my engine ticking as it cooled. Through the front window, I could see them. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd signed that paper 48 hours ago. There was a box of donuts in the center of the table. They were laughing. I didn't knock. I walked in, the heavy mortgage denial letter crumpled in my right hand. The laughter died the second the screen door slammed. My father looked up, his brow furrowing. Leo didn't even turn around, he just reached for a glazed donut. "Sarah," my father said, "you're back early, something wrong at work." "I went to the bank," I said. I walked to the table and flattened the letter onto the wood right over the box of donuts. "I was denied. My credit score is 512. I have $114,000 in debt I never touched. 11 accounts, Dad, 19 signatures." The silence that followed was heavy. Leo stopped chewing. He slowly set the donut back in the box, his eyes fixed on the table. He didn't look at me. He didn't look surprised. My father didn't even glance at the letter. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "We were going to talk to you about that, Sarah, once Leo's firm got off the ground." "Talk to me," my voice cracked. "He stole my identity. He used my social security number to buy a car that costs more than my college degree. He maxed out credit cards in my name." "He didn't steal it," my father said, his voice dropping into that low, dangerous tone he used to end arguments. "He used it. There's a difference. He's your brother. He's trying to build something real, and he needed a little help with the optics. People don't invest in guys who drive 10-year-old sedans." "He needed a sports car more than I need a house," I asked. My hands were flat on the table, shaking. "Exactly," my father said. He said it like he was explaining basic math to a child. "You're smart, Sarah. You're stable. You have a good job. You can build your credit back in a few years. You're young, but your brother, this is his window. He needs this car now. He needs the image now. You're just being selfish because you wanted a garden and some crown molding." I looked at Leo. "You have nothing to say." Leo finally looked up. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. "God, Sarah, don't be so dramatic. I'm going to pay it back. Once the first big contract closes, I'll wipe the whole thing out. It's a temporary loan between family. You're making it into a federal case." "It is a federal case," I said. "It's felony fraud." My father stood up so fast his chair screeched against the tile. He leaned over the table, his face inches from mine. "You listen to me. Nobody is talking about felonies. You are going to take the hit. You're going to stay in that apartment for another couple of years, and you're going to let your brother get ahead. That's what family does. We absorb each other's weight. Now, pick up that letter and put it in your bag." I felt a hand on my arm. It was my mother. She had appeared from the hallway, her face pale and her eyes red. She pulled me toward the laundry room, away from the men. "Sarah, please," she whispered. She was trembling. "Just do what he says. You know how your father gets. He's already put so much of his own pride into Leo's success. If you go to the police, if you blow this up, it'll kill your father. He couldn't handle the shame of his son being in jail." "What about me, Mom?" I asked. "It's killing my future. I worked for that money. I saved every penny. They took it." "You're strong," she said, tears spilling over. "You've always been the strong one, Leo." He's fragile. He needs the support. Please, for the sake of the family, keep the peace." She wasn't asking me to forgive. She was asking me to disappear so the men could keep playing their games. She was the one who cleared the plates. Now she wanted me to clear the crimes. "Keep the peace," I repeated. "Yes," she sobbed. "Please." I looked past her. In the kitchen, my father was patting Leo on the back. Leo was smiling again. He picked up the donut and took a large, triumphant bite. He knew he was safe. He knew I was the responsible one, and the responsible one always bows to the loudest voice in the room. I didn't argue anymore. My throat felt like it was full of dry wool. I reached back into the kitchen, snatched the mortgage denial letter, and tucked it into my bag. "Fine," I said. My voice was dead. "That's my girl," my father called out, not even looking at me. "I knew you'd see reason." I walked out the front door. I got into my car and drove straight to a hardware store. I bought a heavy-duty, fireproof lockbox and a set of high-security locks for my apartment. I went home, locked my door, and sat on the floor of my studio. I pulled out a fresh, yellow legal pad. At the top of the page, I wrote, Folder 1, the timeline. I wasn't keeping the peace. I was just making sure that when I broke it, there would be nothing left to put back together. Over the next 8 months, the world didn't stop, but mine felt like it was moving in slow motion. I stayed in my studio apartment. I kept my head down at work, and I watched from the sidelines as my brother lived a life paid for by my credit score. Every Sunday, I was expected at my parents' house for dinner. It was the price of peace. I'd sit there, picking at my food, while Leo's red sports car sat in the driveway like a taunt. He didn't just drive it, he performed with it. He'd arrive late, revving the engine so the neighbors would look, then toss his keys onto the counter with a heavy thud that always seemed to happen right when I was speaking. "It's about the presents, Sarah," my father said one evening, gesturing toward the window where the sunset hit the Rosso Corsa's hood. "Since Leo got that car, people are taking him seriously. He's got 3 different logistics firms wanting to talk. It's an investment in the Miller name." "It's an investment in a depreciating asset," I said, my voice flat. My father's smile vanished. "There you go again. Bitter, you're renting a box while your brother is building an empire and all you can do is count the pennies. It's embarrassing." Leo let out a short, sharp laugh. "Don't be hard on her, Dad. Some people are just built for the small life. Sarah likes her little apartment. It's safe. No risks, no rewards, right?" That became the running joke. At a family barbecue 2 weeks later, my aunt asked why I hadn't moved into the house I'd been talking about for years. Before I could answer, my father stepped in, a beer in his hand and a loud, performative grin on his face. "Oh, Sarah's having some financial struggles," he said, using his fingers to make air quotes. "You know how it is with these office jobs. High overhead, low growth. She's decided to stick to renting for a while, probably for the best." Not everyone is cut out for the responsibility of a mortgage. My cousin looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. I felt the heat rise in my neck. I looked at Leo, who was leaning against his car, surrounded by my younger cousins who were gawking at the interior. He caught my eye and winked. He was using my ruined reputation to make himself look like the family success story. He wasn't just stealing my money, he was stealing my character. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I'd started a new habit. Every time I was at the house, I'd wait for them to get distracted, usually when my father was bragging about Leo's firm, and I'd slip into the mudroom where the mail was kept. I started taking pictures. I photographed the late notices for the credit cards. I photographed the insurance premium for the sports car, a premium that was being billed to me. I even found a folder in my father's desk labeled Leo's launch. Inside were the original dealership documents. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I flipped through the pages. There it was, the witness signature on the secondary financing. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, the sharp, aggressive M in Miller, the way he looped his Y, he hadn't just known, he had facilitated it. He had stood there in that glass showroom and watched my brother forge my name 19 times, and then he had signed his own name to validate the lie. I took a clear, high-resolution photo of every page. The spillover started hitting my professional life, too. A week later, my boss called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, we're doing the annual compliance and background renewals," he said, staring at a folder on his desk. "Your credit pull came back with a massive delinquency flag, over 100,000 in debt and several accounts in collections. This is a problem for your bonding." "I'm handling it, Mr. Henderson," I said. "It's a family matter, identity theft." "Have you filed a police report?" he asked. I hesitated. I thought of my mother's sobbing face. I thought of my father's warning. "Not yet." "Then it's just debt, Sarah," he said, closing the folder. "And in this industry, debt makes you a liability. You have 60 days to show me a resolution, or I have to pull you from the accounts." I walked out of his office and sat at my desk. My hands were steady, but my heart was cold. My family was willing to let me lose my career to keep Leo in a car he couldn't afford. That night, I went home and uploaded the photos of the dealership documents to a secure cloud drive. I printed them out and added them to the lockbox. I looked at the folder. It was getting thick. I wasn't the responsible one anymore. I was the witness. And I was done being the only one who knew the truth. The roadblock came 3 weeks later. I was sitting in my studio apartment, surrounded by printouts of my credit report and photos of the mail I'd intercepted, when I realized the folder had a massive, hollow center. I had the what, the debt, the car, the signatures. But to actually prove it was fraud in a way that wouldn't just be my word against my father's, I needed the how. I needed the original digital footprints. I had tried calling the dealership and the credit card companies on my own. It was a nightmare of hold music and scripted responses. "I'm sorry, Ms. Miller," one representative told me. "Since the account was opened with a matching social security number and a verified physical signature that matches your state ID, we cannot release the internal IP logs or the dealer's original scan contracts without a subpoena or a police report." It was a catch-22. I couldn't get the proof without the police, but I didn't want to go to the police until the proof was so absolute that my father couldn't bully his way out of it. I knew how he worked. If there was a single shadow of a doubt, he'd fill it with a lie and make me look like the crazy daughter trying to ruin her successful brother. I needed an ally. I didn't go to a lawyer. I couldn't afford one, and a lawyer felt too aggressive for this stage. Instead, I went back to my bank. Not to Mrs. Gable, the loan officer who had denied my mortgage, but to the fraud department. I'd seen a name on one of the letters they'd sent me, Marcus Thorne, Senior Fraud Investigator. I waited in the lobby for 40 minutes before he agreed to see me. Marcus was a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a desk covered in stacks of manila folders. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who had seen every possible way one human could screw over another. "I've seen your file, Ms. Miller," Marcus said, leaning back. 11 accounts, high-end auto, it's a classic bust-out profile except for one thing. The person doing it is using your real home address, well, your parents' address. Usually, fraudsters use a drop box or a burner apartment. "It's my brother," I said. My voice didn't shake. "And my father is helping him. My father witnessed the signatures." Marcus stopped clicking his pen. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. The room went very quiet. "That's a heavy accusation to bring to a bank investigator." "I have photos of the dealership documents," I said, sliding my phone across the desk. "Look at the witness line, that's my father's handwriting. He co-signed as a witness to a forgery of my name." Marcus scrolled through the photos. He zoomed in on the signatures. He spent a long time looking at the date and time stamps. Then he looked back at me. "You realize that if I help you find what you're looking for, there is no keeping it in the family anymore?" he asked. "Once the bank verifies this level of internal collusion, we are legally required to report it to the authorities. I can't hide this for you." "I don't want you to hide it," I said. "I want the truth to be the only thing left standing." Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted. He recognized the look in my eyes. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. "Wait here," he said. He was gone for nearly an hour. I sat in that small, windowless office, listening to the muffled sounds of the bank. I thought about the house I'd lost. I thought about the garden I'd never plant on Elm Street. I thought about the red car. When Marcus returned, he was carrying a single, stapled packet. He laid it on the desk and tapped the top page. "I used our backdoor channels with the other creditors," he said. "Because your primary checking is here, I can cross-reference the digital applications. Look at the IP addresses for the credit card applications." I looked. There were 4 different dates, but every single application had been submitted from the same IP address. "That's my parents' home Wi-Fi," I whispered. "And look at the time stamps," Marcus pointed out. 3 of these were submitted on a Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. Our records show you were logged into your workstation at the insurance firm during those exact windows. You were processing claims 3 towns away, while someone at that IP address was pretending to be you. Then he flipped to the last page. It was a copy of the electronic signature log for the largest personal loan, $15,000. The signature was verified using a secondary email address, Marcus said. "It isn't yours. It belongs to a Miller Logistics LLC. I did a quick search. That LLC was registered 6 months ago. The registered agent, your father. There it was. Not just a hint, not just a suspicion. It was a map. My father hadn't just stood by. He had provided the digital infrastructure for the theft. He had created an email address in the name of a fake company to verify the forged signatures. "This is enough," I said, my hand trembling as I took the packet. "It's more than enough," Marcus said. "It's a blueprint for a felony, but Sarah, you should know. When this hits, it's going to hit everyone. Your brother for the theft and your father for conspiracy and fraud. They aren't going to get a slap on the wrist for this, not with this dollar amount." "I know," I said. "Are you sure?" I thought about my mother begging me to keep the peace. I thought about my father telling me I was selfish for wanting a house. I thought about the 19 signatures. "I'm not the one who broke the peace," I said. "I'm just the one who stopped pretending it was still there." I walked out of the bank with the packet tucked under my arm. For the first time in 8 months, the weight in my chest felt different. It wasn't a burden anymore. It was leverage. I went home and added the IP logs and the LLC registration to the folder. I didn't cry. I didn't call my mother. I just sat in the dark and waited for the phone to ring. I knew it would. My father always called when he wanted something else. That was the night I realized that support doesn't always look like a hug. Sometimes, it looks like a stranger in a bank giving you the keys to your own prison. The folder was finally heavy. It wasn't just a collection of grievances anymore. It was a physical weight that lived in the back of my closet, tucked inside the fireproof lockbox. Every time I looked at it, I saw the 19 red-highlighted signatures, the time-stamped IP logs from my father's house, and the registration for Miller Logistics LLC. It was no longer a story of a brother's mistake. It was a map of a conspiracy. I knew the leverage was real because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of my father's phone calls. The call came on a Thursday evening, just as I was heating up a bowl of soup in my studio. I saw his name on the screen and didn't feel that familiar tightening in my chest. I just wiped my hands on a towel and answered. "Sarah," my father said. He didn't lead with a greeting, he led with a demand. "We need you to come by the house on Saturday morning. Bring your ID and your latest pay stubs." "Why, Dad?" I asked. My voice was level. "Leo's firm is hitting a little cash flow snag. Nothing major, just a timing issue with a vendor. We're going to open a small consolidation loan to bridge the gap and keep the payments on that car from falling behind. It'll actually help your credit to have a fresh, active account in good standing. We're doing you a favor, really." I looked at the wall where a framed photo of my graduation used to hang. I'd taken it down a month ago. "You want me to co-sign another loan for a car I don't drive and a business that doesn't have any clients? Don't start with the attitude," he snapped. "I'm tired of the drama. You've been moping for months while your brother is out there grinding. If we don't get this loan, the interest on those cards is going to spike, and that's going to hurt your name, not his. You're already in the hole, Sarah. This is the only way out. Be here at 10. "I'll be there," I said. "Good, and don't tell your mother you're bringing the pay stubs. She gets worked up about the numbers. Just show up and do your part." He hung up. He didn't even wait for a confirmation. He was so certain of my compliance that he didn't feel the need to secure it. To him, I was still the utility mule. I was the resource he could tap whenever Leo's lifestyle started to leak. That was the trap. He thought he was forcing me into a corner, but he was actually giving me the perfect setting for the end of the game. I spent Friday afternoon at a local print shop. I didn't use the office copier. I didn't want any digital trail on my company's servers. I made 3 high-quality color copies of everything in the folder. Copy 1 went into a sealed envelope addressed to my boss, Mr. Henderson, with a note explaining that the financial resolution he requested was underway. Copy 2 went into my bank's night drop box for Marcus Thorne, along with a formal affidavit of identity theft. Copy 3 stayed with me. I also made one final phone call. It wasn't to a lawyer or a friend. It was to the detective I'd been researching, a man named Detective Miller, no relation, who specialized in white-collar crime and elder abuse. I told him I had a briefcase full of forensic evidence involving 6 figures of identity theft and an active conspiracy to commit further bank fraud. "I'm meeting the suspects tomorrow morning at 10, I told him. "They expect me to sign more fraudulent documents." "Don't sign anything," the detective said. His voice was gravelly and professional. "Just get them in the room. We'll handle the rest." That night, I sat on my floor and looked at the sports car's insurance policy one last time. My father had listed himself as the primary driver's guardian, a weird bit of phrasing that proved he still viewed Leo as a child who needed protection, even at the cost of his daughter's life. I realized then that my father didn't hate me. He just didn't see me. I was the furniture. You don't ask the chair if it minds being sat on, you just sit. I felt a strange sense of calm. The leverage had changed the physics of our relationship. For 28 years, I had been the one pushing against their weight, trying to keep the family upright. Tomorrow, I was going to stop pushing. I was just going to move out of the way and let the whole structure collapse under its own dishonesty. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't write a letter. I just set my alarm for 7 a.m. That was the last night I ever spent as the responsible daughter. I fell asleep wondering if Leo had ever actually driven the car above 60 miles an hour, or if he just liked the way people looked at him while he was idling. Saturday morning was clear and cold. I spent an hour in my car outside my parents' house, just watching the exhaust plume in the rearview mirror. I had the folder in the passenger seat. It wasn't in a bag or a briefcase. I wanted them to see the sheer volume of what I'd collected. I checked my phone. One text from Detective Miller. "Units are 3 minutes out. We will enter 60 seconds after you signal." My signal was a simple text. "The pen is on the table." I walked up the driveway past the red sports car. It was covered in a thin layer of frost that made it look like a cheap toy left out in the yard. I didn't feel anger when I looked at it anymore. I just felt a profound sense of exhaustion. When I walked into the kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of expensive coffee. My father was already seated at the head of the table, a stack of papers and a sleek, heavy fountain pen laid out in front of him. Leo was leaning against the refrigerator, wearing a designer tracksuit, looking like he'd already spent the money from the loan they hadn't even secured yet. "You're late," my father said, checking his watch. "The mobile notary will be here in 20 minutes. Sit down. Let's look over the pay stubs." "I didn't bring them," I said. I sat down opposite him and laid the heavy, color-coded folder on the wood. I didn't open it yet. I just let it sit there, a physical barrier between us. Leo let out a snort. "What is that, your scrapbooking project? We don't have time for your drama, Sarah. Just give Dad the stubs so we can finish the application." "This isn't an application, Leo," I said. I looked at my father. "This is a record. I have the IP logs from this house. I have the security footage from the dealership. I have the registration for Miller Logistics LLC, which you opened using a forged version of my signature to verify a $15,000 personal loan." My father's face didn't change at first. He just stared at the folder. Then, slowly, his eyes shifted to mine. The arrogance was still there, but a flicker of something else, calculation, began to stir behind it. "I told you not to make this into something," he said, his voice a low, vibrating growl. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sarah. You think some printouts from the internet mean anything? I'm your father. I've supported you for 28 years. You think a judge is going to listen to a bitter daughter over a pillar of the community?" "I'm not going to a judge, Dad," I said. "I've already gone to the bank, and the detective is already in the neighborhood." Leo stepped away from the fridge, his face going pale. "What are you talking about? You called the cops, over a car. Are you insane?" "It's not just a car, Leo," I said, finally opening the folder. I slid the first page across, the one with the 19 red circles. "It's 19 counts of felony forgery. It's identity theft over $100,000. It's bank fraud." My mother walked into the room then, clutching a dish towel. She saw the folder, saw Leo's face, and immediately began to shake. "Sarah, please, we talked about this. Your father said he'd fix it. Just put the papers away." "He didn't fix it, Mom," I said. "He tried to double down. He asked me to come here today to sign more fraudulent documents. He was never going to stop until I was in jail or bankrupt." My father suddenly lunged across the table, his hand snapping out to grab the folder. I didn't flinch, I just leaned back. He snatched the papers, his face twisted in a mask of pure rage. "These mean nothing," he screamed, beginning to tear the pages in half. "You have no proof." "I'll tell them you authorized everything. I'll tell them you're unstable. Your mother will back me up, right, Martha?" My mother didn't answer. She just covered her mouth with the towel and sank into a chair. "Tear them up, Dad," I said quietly. "I have 6 more copies. One is with my boss. One is with the bank's fraud investigator. And the originals, they're already in a digital evidence locker at the precinct." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My thumb hovered over the message screen. "This is your last move," my father hissed, his hands trembling as he held the shredded remains of the IP logs. "If you do this, you are dead to this family. You will never step foot in this house again. You will have no one. Is a house worth that? Is your credit worth being an orphan?" I looked around the room. I looked at the expensive coffee, the red car in the driveway, the mother who wouldn't speak, and the brother who thought my life was his to spend. "I've been an orphan for 8 months, Dad," I said. "I just didn't have the paperwork to prove it until now." I typed 5 words into my phone. The pen is on the table. I hit send. "What did you do?" Leo whispered. I didn't answer. I just stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, I saw the first blue and red lights crest the hill. There were 3 cars. They weren't coming for a misunderstanding. I felt a strange, cold peace. The countdown was over. I was standing on the threshold of a different life, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who had to carry the weight of what happened next. The first squad car didn't use its siren, but the strobing blue and red light against the kitchen's yellow wallpaper made the room look like it was vibrating. My father froze, his hands still clutching the shredded remains of my IP logs. Leo's face went a shade of gray I'd never seen on a living person. "Sarah," my father whispered, the rage in his voice replaced by a frantic, high-pitched desperation. "Sarah, call them off. Tell them it's a mistake. We'll fix the credit. I'll sell my truck. Just don't let them come in here." "It's not my call anymore, Dad," I said. I stayed by the window, my back to the glass. "The folder is already at the precinct. The bank has already filed the suspicious activity reports. This is a state matter now." There was a heavy, rhythmic pounding on the front door. It wasn't a neighborly knock. It was the sound of authority. "Police, open up." My mother finally stood up, the dish towel falling to the floor. She looked at my father, then at the door, then at me. "Gary, do something," she whimpered. "The neighbors are going to see." "I can't do anything if she doesn't stop them," my father roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. He turned back to me, his eyes bulging. "You're destroying this family over a car, a piece of metal. Is this what I raised? A snitch?" "You didn't raise a snitch, Dad," I said, my voice steady even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "You raised a resource, and the resource is empty. I have nothing left for you to take." The front door opened. I'd left it unlocked, and 3 officers moved into the hallway. 2 were in uniform, 1 was in a suit. That was Detective Miller. He walked into the kitchen with a calm, practiced gait, his eyes immediately scanning the room. He took in the shredded paper on the table, my father's aggressive posture, and Leo's slumped form. "Gary Miller, Leo Miller?" the detective asked. "This is a private residence," my father blustered, trying to regain his pillar of the community persona. He straightened his back, though his hands were still shaking. "My daughter has had a bit of a mental episode. She's been under a lot of stress with her work. We're just handling a family disagreement." Detective Miller didn't even blink. He pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. "I have a warrant here for the arrest of Leo Miller on charges of first-degree identity theft, felony forgery, and bank fraud. And I have a secondary warrant for you, Gary, for conspiracy and tampering with financial records." The room went deathly quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. "Warrant," Leo choked out. He looked at the handcuffs on the lead officer's belt and started to back away toward the laundry room. It wasn't just me. Dad told me to do it. He said Sarah wouldn't mind. He said she had plenty of credit to spare." "You shut your mouth, Leo," my father screamed. "He's right, isn't he?" the detective said, stepping between them. He looked at the table. "Is that the evidence Sarah provided, the stuff you just tried to destroy?" My father looked at the scraps of paper. He looked at me. For a second, I saw the old power in his eyes, the look that used to make me apologize for things I didn't do. But then he looked at the detective, and the power evaporated. He looked old. He looked small. "I was trying to help my son," my father said, his voice breaking. "What kind of father doesn't help his son?" "The kind who doesn't ruin his daughter to do it," the detective replied. The next 10 minutes felt like a choreographed play. The officers moved in. One of them guided Leo's hands behind his back. The metallic clink-clink of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Leo started to sob, loud, jagged sounds that filled the kitchen. He didn't look like a high-end logistics mogul. He looked like a terrified child who had finally been caught with his hand in the jar. "Sarah, help me," Leo wailed as they led him toward the door. Tell them we're family." I didn't say a word. I just watched him pass. Then it was my father's turn. He didn't fight. He didn't sob. He just stood there, his arms limp at his sides as the second officer reached for his wrists. He kept his eyes fixed on me the entire time. "You'll never have a father again," he hissed as the cuffs tightened. I hope that house was worth it. I hope you enjoy sitting in your garden alone. I've been alone in your house for years, Dad, I said. At least at my house, the locks will actually work. As they led them out, my mother collapsed back into her chair. She wasn't looking at the police or her husband. She was looking at the box of donuts on the table. She looked like she had been hollowed out. "How could you do this, Sarah?" she whispered. "To your own blood." "I didn't do this, Mom," I said, walking over to her. "I didn't touch her. I couldn't. They did this. They signed the papers. They drove the car. They lied to my face for 8 months. You watched them do it. You cleared the plates while they ate my future." "We just wanted peace," she moaned. "No," I said. "You wanted quiet. There's a difference. Peace requires justice. Quiet just requires a victim. I'm done being the victim." I walked out the front door. The neighborhood was awake now. Mrs. Higgins from next door was standing on her porch in a bathrobe, her hand over her mouth. A group of teenagers on bikes had stopped at the end of the driveway, filming with their phones. They saw Leo, head bowed, being pushed into the back of a cruiser. They saw my father, the pillar, being ducked into another. And then they saw the tow truck. Detective Miller had called it in early. As the police cars pulled away, the tow truck backed into the driveway. The driver didn't waste any time. He hooked the chains to the chassis of the Rosso Corsa. The car tilted. The tires cleared the pavement. The red paint caught the morning sun one last time, gleaming and beautiful and utterly fraudulent. I stood on the sidewalk and watched as my brother's image was hauled away toward an impound lot. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank app. A small, automated message. "Your dispute for account ending in -4402 has been escalated to verified fraud. Temporary credit adjustments are being applied." I leaned against my old, dented sedan. I was exhausted. I was an orphan. My credit was a disaster zone that would take months of paperwork to clean. But as I watched the tow truck turn the corner, I felt a lightness in my chest that no mortgage could buy. I wasn't the resource anymore. I was just Sarah, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. The indictment was handed down 6 weeks later. My brother didn't get a plea deal. The prosecution had too much: the IP logs, the 19 signatures, and the fact that he'd been using a fake LLC to launder personal loans. He was sentenced to 3 years in a minimum security facility. My father, thanks to his lack of a prior record and his age, received 5 years of felony probation and was ordered to pay full restitution. To pay that restitution, and to cover the mountain of legal fees he'd accrued trying to keep Leo out of a cell, he had to drain his entire retirement fund. He also had to sell the house. The last time I saw my mother, she was standing in the driveway of that house, surrounded by cardboard boxes. She looked small and faded, like a photograph left in the sun too long. She didn't look at me when I pulled up to the curb. She just kept taping a box shut, her movements jerky and stiff. "I'm moving into a 1-bedroom in the city," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your father is staying with his brother until the probation officer clears his new residence. I hope you're happy, Sarah. You got your justice. We're just homeless." "You aren't homeless, Mom," I said. "You're just living within your means, for the first time in your life." I didn't stay. There was nothing left to say to a woman who still thought family was a reason to commit a crime. It took 8 more months of paperwork, phone calls, and visits to the bank, but Marcus Thorne stayed true to his word. Because the police report was filed and the convictions were secured, the $114,800 in debt was legally expunged from my record. My credit score didn't just recover, it bounced back higher than it had been before the theft. I didn't buy the cottage on Elm Street. Someone else had snatched that up months ago. Instead, I found a small, sturdy brick house on the north side of town. It has a heavy oak door and a backyard that gets the afternoon sun. The afternoon I signed the final closing papers, I sat at a mahogany desk in a quiet office. I didn't rush. I read every single word of every single page. When I got to the signature line, I didn't feel a tremor in my hand. I signed my name 19 times across the various disclosures and titles. Each signature felt like a brick in a wall I was building around my own life. As I walked out of the title office, my keys heavy in my pocket, I saw a familiar flash of red in the distance. A tow truck was pulling onto the main road, hauling a car toward a local auction lot. It wasn't Leo's car. His had been sold months ago to cover the bank's initial losses, but it looked just like it. Sleek, aggressive, and fast. I didn't stop to watch it. I just got into my old sedan and drove toward my new front door. I'm sitting on my back porch now. The sun is starting to dip below the tree line, turning the grass a deep, bruised purple. It's quiet here. There are no revving engines, no demands for pay stubs, and no one telling me I'm selfish for wanting to own the ground I stand on. The folder is gone. I burned it in a small fire pit in the yard the night I moved in. I watched the 19 red circles turn to ash and blow away into the dark. I'm 29 years old. My credit is clean, my house is mine, and my phone is silent. It's a lonely kind of peace, but it's the only kind I've ever been able to trust. I have one question. If someone you loved asked you to set your own life on fire to keep them warm, would you hold the match, or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments. I read every one of them. If this story reminded you that your future is worth protecting, even from the people who raised you, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel reach others who might be sitting at a kitchen table right now, wondering if they're allowed to say no. If you want to hear about another time a family secret blew up a life, check out the story on your screen right now. Stay safe, keep your files locked, and remember, your name is yours and nobody else's.